I'm here to tell you a story about a project that was created 10 years ago. In fact, this week is the 10th anniversary. It's of a project conducted with the World Innovation Summit for Education called Learning Reimagined. I'm going to revisit some of the themes that came from that project and see how relevant they are and where we might be going next. So, fairly big tome, quite good as a doorstop as well, designed very much like a magazine. It's a transmedia, qualitative comparative study of how digital platforms are changing the way we learn, the way we communicate, the way we live. The output comprised a book that you just saw there. It's out of print, unfortunately. Augmented reality app that I coded, and a short film series. And as I say, it was published 10 years ago, commissioned by the World Innovation Summit for Education in Qatar, and published by Bloomsbury. What a handsome fellow. Author and director was by myself, and I was blessed to work with Nusha Tavakolian, an Iranian photographer based in Tehran, and has since become incredibly famous and won many awards. And a massive logistics team, of course. This was a fantastic opportunity. We traveled to 18 countries on 6 continents, and worked together over 18 months, 120,000 miles, 36 cities. I can't begin to tell you what an exciting and fantastic experience it was, visiting schools, meeting some of the world's foremost thinkers about learning, spending time with parents, visiting and working within active conflict zones, active crisis zones in an earthquake in China up in the mountains, then finding ourselves in the office of Silicon Valley corporations, leading education countries such as Singapore, asking questions, trying to get answers, trying to understand how the connected society is transforming learning. We also got to interview many foremost thinkers on learning, theorists, political theorists, Noam Chomsky, Siddhartha Mitra, Kerry Facer, Sir Ken Robinson. It was a who's who. One of the biggest questions that kept coming up was, what is school for? What is the purpose of an education? We've heard that many times so far in the conference. And there's different answers. Some say it's a passport to a better life. Others say it's training to pass tests. Some may argue human capital for the economic development plan. Lee Kuan Yew in Singapore, for example, saw education as a structure to deliver that human capital, to take Singapore from its situation into a financial services powerhouse and now creative powerhouse. Others might say, in this case is Ivan Illich, who we didn't interview, but from the 1970s, he said school is the advertising agency which makes you believe that you need society as it is, imbuing education with a form of indoctrination. So we asked a few people.
We can ask ourselves what the purpose of an educational system is. And of course, there are sharp differences on this matter. There's the traditional an interpretation that comes from the Enlightenment, which holds that the highest goal in life is to inquire and create, to search the riches of the past, try to internalize the parts of them that are significant to you, carry that quest for understanding further in your own way. Purpose of education, from that point of view, is just to help people determine how to learn on their own. It's you, the learner, who is going to achieve in the course of education, and it's really up to you what you'll master, where you'll go, how you'll use it, how you'll go on to produce something new and exciting for yourself, maybe for others. That's one concept of education. The other concept is essentially indoctrination. People have the idea that from childhood, young people have to be placed into a framework in which they'll follow orders, accept existing frameworks, not challenge, and so on. And this is often quite explicit. Since that time, there have been many measures taken to try to turn the educational system towards more control, more indoctrination, more vocational training, imposing a debt which traps students, young people, into a life of conformity and so on. That's the exact opposite of the what I referred to as the tradition that comes out of the Enlightenment. And there's a constant struggle between those. In the colleges, in the schools, do you train for passing tests, or do you train for a creative inquiry, pursuing interests that are aroused by material that's presented and that you want to pursue either on your own or in cooperation with others? And this goes all the way through up to graduate school and research.
Because universities are significantly changing. So if you design your education system just around the idea that it's about shuffling kids into the university setting, we're potentially in all sorts of trouble. The universities, as they are at the moment, just may not exist in that form in the next 15, 20 years. So if we're talking about educating kids now, we need to be thinking, what education do they actually need? Not how do we simply move them on the conveyor belt to the university and then ostensibly to the job. Because the simple fact is a university degree, even from the best university in the world these days, does not guarantee you security, well-being, and an income for life. We need whole different measures for how you build that sort of security.
We built the educational system to train kids to sit still long enough to work in a factory. That's what it's for, to create compliant, obedient factory workers. So the question we need to ask is, what is school for now? We're not asking that question. Parents, administrators, taxpayers are not asking the question, what is school for? I have an opinion. I think what it's not for is to create more factory workers, because we don't need more factory workers. I think what we need to do is teach kids two things. One, how to solve interesting problems, and two, how to lead. And yet, if you look at just about any public school in North America or Europe, we're not teaching that. We're teaching kids how to do well on the test instead.
So, a lot of different perspectives. Some you may agree with, some you may argue with, and so forth. But this is reporting on what we found. This variety of different ways of looking at education. We saw these different sort of competing things, there are arguments raging about trads and progressives. Is it knowledge that we need? Is it skills that we need? Is it instructionism? Is it constructionism? Almost these binaries. I mean, we see a lot of binaries in society these days. And I do wonder whether these are some kind of false dichotomies. I mean, these arguments, of course, have been going on since Plato and Aristotle. There's a reason we have the term Platonic. You know, you can learn all about something but not actually do it. You know, we have a system where you could read books about swimming, maybe watch a few YouTube clips, pass a city's written exam on swimming and get an A, and then get thrown in a swimming pool and you find you can't swim. So I think this argument has been raging for years. And of course, more recently, and we've heard John Dewey mentioned many times in his book, The Child and Curriculum, you know, this idea of one school fixing attention on the importance of subject matter driving the educational experience, the purpose of education, the assessment. He talks about another school of thought, which is the child-centered. It's about self-realization, who we are, what our passions are, what our interests. Seymour Papert, who I had the pleasure of working with from a very young age, actually, when I was 17, not really knowing who he was. But the reason why I'm here is because of this man. He was asked a question in 1997, if you were to reinvent the system, what 3 changes would you make? His reply, do away with the curriculum, do away with segregation by age, and do away with the idea that it should be uniformity of all schools and of what people learn. And it's kind of interesting, isn't it? We sort of take it for granted that we stream children in schools by date of manufacture, as opposed to where they are in their learning. And this idea that we have the same kind of schooling, regardless of context and where we might be, you know, whether in rural Uganda or rural Bihar or in Bucharest or in London. It just seems strange when you think about it. So let's ask
My name is
some
Forrest.
kids.
I'm 16 years old. I'm going to school in Tooting. I'm doing A-levels at the moment, and I'm studying English literature, film studies, psychology and biology.
My name's Anukis. I'm 16 and I go to school in South London studying chemistry, biology, maths and Spanish.
When I'm older, I want to be a screenwriter and maybe a director. In a way, I feel like my teachers want to set me up for that, but then the curriculum doesn't really allow them to. It's all about passing an exam, and a lot of it is just how to answer a question on how to analyse a film, or how cinematography is used in this film, not really how you can use cinematography to make a film, or how you can use the mise-en-scène to make a film. I think if I designed it, I'd kind of make it about how to make a film and then how you can learn from other films that are made.
I feel like sometimes school is kind of like the lock and key theory. It's quite like everything is one way. In actuality, every child is different. So to teach every child in the same way and give them the same curriculum and give them the same examination style is not really correct.
The school just kind of teaches you to pass exams now. It doesn't really teach you for what's beyond that. Or they teach you how to get into university because it looks good for the school, not necessarily because they want you to go to university.
Recently they've been changing the exams and they've been changing them to applying knowledge. The pass rate was 14% out of 100 and they were so shocked at how low it was, but it's because they don't teach you how to understand it.
I don't feel like a lot is done to help kids who aren't very academic because they just want you to do well in exams. They don't really care that much about the people unless they talk to the people a lot. And even then, I feel like a lot of those kids then go to college because then they can just choose one subject that they enjoy. So I don't feel like secondary school especially is really set up to help people who aren't that academic.
You'd basically have to rip the school system apart and rebuild it again. I mean, you would have to give more independence and trust to younger people. I feel like if you give someone the responsibility, in the beginning they may not be the best at it, but they will, we all learn to adapt as humans and we will pick it up. And I feel like if you give more responsibility to a child, they'll actually do something with it, but it's the fact that you're telling them they can't is what makes them not want to do it.
I feel like teachers should have more freedom in what they want to teach, and students should be able to have more of a choice in what they want to learn. And I feel like they should teach you how to live a life as an adult when you have to live by yourself. It's not just your parents' role to teach you that. If you're at school for more hours than you see your parents, they need to be teaching you how to live life as an adult when you don't have a schooling system anymore.
So, interesting. Now, since the publication of the book in 2014, we've seen a global pandemic, major climatic events, and the erosion of truth. It's been an interesting time, hasn't it? We've also seen technological advances and progress in artificial intelligence and automation that present an opportunity to transform the future of work. Our education systems have yet to transform, and that's why this conversation at this conference is so urgent and so exciting and so necessary. So I took a stab when I was writing the book at what the purpose of education is. And this is my version, you might have a different one. And I thought, well, it's to equip present and future generations with the knowledge and skills to thrive in a rapidly changing world. And I might add one more word to that, and I would add the word together. So what does this future look like? I mean, it's not a place. You know, you can anticipate it. It doesn't exist yet. What do we know? What can we anticipate? Well, we're already beginning the fourth industrial revolution. We've been hearing about that a lot at this conference, you know, characterized by AI, automation, ubiquitous supercomputers, self-driving cars, gene editing, and so on. Exciting, fantastic, what a time to be alive. But often I'm asked this question, will robots take all the jobs, or AI take all the jobs? It's great that we can get productivity increases and increases in GDP, but what if it doesn't benefit all the people? But I'm optimistic, actually. I think that we can have a more optimistic outlook, where humans get the opportunity to do what they're good at. We can automate the work and humanize the jobs. Now, this gentleman, Frederick Taylor, going back in time, his pioneering work in measurement and data analysis, you know, him and people that followed him like Quetelet and so on, paved the way, unknowingly, for automation and AI. You can describe something by measurement and by rules. You can ultimately automate it. Indeed, this was the idea of how companies and industrial companies were built. Building blocks, if you could have a job description, describe each block. Of course, those job descriptions are now computer programs for AI. And that approach has been applied for manufacturing. It transformed craft production to mass production. In some cases, it's been applied to education. If we just measure everything, we can take the art and the craft of teaching out of the equation. We can turn education into a delivery system. I think that fundamentally misunderstands the nature of teaching. Teaching is relational, it's not FedEx. So when we try and think about what the jobs of the future are, it's never been easier, because they're the jobs the machines can't do. And I think that's great, because it allows us to return to being human and not these robots that we were outputting. And there are numerous areas, and I've chosen 3 areas where humans beat machines. You know, creative endeavors. And of course, I'm talking about art and music and writing and all these kinds of things, but I'm also thinking about scientific discovery. AI doesn't make the discovery, we use AI to make discoveries. Let's get this in the right order. Entrepreneurship. There's never been a better time to be an entrepreneur, to build solutions to problems. So creative endeavors. Social interactions. We're very good at that, most of us. So I'm talking about teaching, counseling, hospitality. where we engage with each other. There's so many attempts to replace these with machines, but they suck. You know, someone's telling me that we don't need counselors anymore because we can use an AI. No, it's a sociopath. It mirrors. It's like living with a cluster B personality. Now, I know some of our political leaders are like that. Some of them are having an election next month. But that doesn't mean we should have AIs that do that. They have a place, definitely, but social interaction, this is amazing. Where are the jobs going to come from? We're going to need many, many more teachers. You know, there are children to look after. There are the older people to care for. This is an area where we are human. It's about what we value. And mobility and dexterity. I mean, yes, I've seen fantastic things with robots that are very mobile, but we are very adaptable to the environment that we're in, naturally. So think about jobs in that area, and then what our education might be about in terms of developing talent. At the same time, we have existential challenges. You know, we can't look the other way. We know these challenges. It's from climate to ideology, pandemics, living together, migrating populations, aging populations. I mean, probably the biggest existential threat at the moment is things like social media and the erosion of truth. If you don't believe in anything, if we don't believe in, say, for example, client science and so forth, we're in a lot of trouble. So how, if we think about education, about thriving, we might want to think about what we can anticipate for the future. 21st century challenges, if you like.
There are a whole set of things that look like they're challenges at the moment. The future doesn't exist. We need to remember that. It's not a real place. So we can't predict it. And the challenge actually is to figure out how we live well with not knowing the future, not with predicting it. So saying there are things that are happening at the moment that we need to address. So we're looking at radical and increasing global inequalities, and that's inequalities within countries and inequalities between countries, to the point that we're ending up with green zones. We have small groups of people who are sequestering themselves from the rest of the world, and large numbers of people who are frankly being left on the heap to sort themselves out. That's a massive problem. We have a massive problem in terms of how we're using our resources. This is not sustainable. We can't continue to live in the way we are at the moment. We have really interesting questions about how we live with an aging population and a globally diverse population that sees a much greater degree of movement. How are we going to live in those sorts of settings? So those are just some of the challenges that I think we're facing.
So, technology. This started off as a project looking at technology and the impact of digital, and we veered into purpose and design. Because we asked this question about, will technology transform learning? The answer is kind of no. You know, education plus technology is just education plus technology. It doesn't equal automatically transformation. Apologies, I went the wrong way. My point is, if you just add technology with an existing purpose and with an existing pedagogy and so forth, it's not going to transform. You know, just sticking your books on an iPad, it's not going to transform things. It may have a slight improvement in cost savings, perhaps, in some cases, but it doesn't change things. And this is something that Seymour Papert said much later. I mean, his point here is that, and it's a bit like Charlie Ledbetter when he was talking about that vortex. It was co-opted, technology was co-opted into that earlier purpose about driven by subject matter and content and instructionism. And so many cases, the uses of technology in education is a bit like this. You know, it's like the passenger conveyors in an airport. You know, you can walk on the conveyor and go faster. I mean, you can sit down and look out the window and everything else. but you always end up in the same destination. I think we have to be mindful of that kind of idea when we use technology. You know, we hear all kinds of AI and, you know, in ed tech and so forth, but it's all about getting kids to this destination, which is set by the purpose. So if the purpose is the same purpose that we had in the 1950s and the early 1900s, then it will just do that more efficiently, quicker. De-skilling the profession, de-skilling teaching. This was interesting. This is a few years back now, but it was this, and it's been superseded. But when this came out, it was like, oh, AI can pass an 8th grade science test. This is amazing. Because it wasn't multiple choice, there was logic and all that kind of stuff. And of course, I'm absolutely confident that 5 years after this, AI can do much more. And everyone's going, oh my gosh, that's great. We can replace teachers. People in poor countries can have education, all this kind of stuff. It's brain dead, isn't it, really? What it means is the test is obsolete. Put all the AI in my mobile computer and then tell me what I need to learn, because I don't need to learn those tests anymore. But no, we haven't done that yet. So this brings us to assessment. You know, this is the sort of tail that wags the dog of learning and teaching, isn't it? Because assessment isn't just about the student, it's also about the teacher. Every time the kids go in here, the teachers are being tested, aren't they? Did you inculcate those facts and procedures into that kid's head long enough for them to remember it, vomit it out, and then forget about it after they leave the examination? Did you do that? I mean, it's mind-boggling, isn't it? Rows of children sitting apart, unable to share answers or collaborate, unable to take the 21st century into the examination room. Beggars belief, really.
It's like the people who produce acid reflux pills aren't trying to cure acid reflux. They want you to keep taking it so you can keep buying their products. And like cigarette manufacturers aren't trying to wean you off them. And there's the sense in which that's true of testing. I mean, there's a kind of benign view of testing, which is that it fulfills necessary purposes in relation to keeping track of standards, accountability, and in providing certification, you know, and qualifications for progress through the system. So, you know, there's a benign way of looking at it and saying, well, it meets those important purposes in education, and there's something to be said about that. What's also true is it's a massively profitable enterprise for publishers. It's one of the engines of the education economy. And the debate isn't about should we get rid of testing, but can we produce more interesting, you know, more expensive forms of it. I mean, in America, states spend, you know, billions of dollars on testing systems. It's a big business. And so it makes it difficult to have a reasoned conversation about it with people, because there are lots of vested interests. Like in the environment, you know, a lot of the arguments about oil and coal aren't being held in some neutral ethical space. You know, in the environment, there are massive vested interests who don't want to be looking at clean source of energy because their profits lie in the existing source of energy, and they'd rather keep it this way until they're exhausted, and then they'll look for some other way of making a profit. That's not being cynical, that's just a matter of fact. It's how the markets work. And there's a market in education for these things. So when we talk about testing, it's a rather complicated picture. If you look at it from a purely educational point of view, as opposed to an ideological point of view or a commercial point of view, education can function perfectly well without tests of the sort that we're currently used to. And it may be able to function even better in future without them, because you know, one purpose of testing is to monitor students' progress. Well, there are better ways of doing that than from standardized competitive testing. There are teacher reports, there are peer group reports, there are portfolios that are given. If we're just interested in making sure that people are making adequate progress, I mean, you know, the occasional diagnostic test is fine. But there are better ways of doing it than sitting people down ritually and routinely and, you know, in sterile conditions and forcing them to answer a set of questions that they may not be, be in the best space to deal with at the time. We know that. There's a whole psychology around testing.
I think the problem is that we take parents seriously when we hear them say, oh, I just want my kid to get these qualifications, or I just want my kid to get into this university. And what we hear is that they therefore want an education system that is about exams and is about results. I genuinely think that what the parents mean in those situations is, I want to get security for my kids, I want to get well-being for my kids, I want them to be able to live well in the world, I want them to be okay when they're in old age. And I think the mistake that we've made is we keep having the conversations about the proxies, the exam results, the certification, and not about the more fundamental questions, which is, what does it take to live well in the world? What is it that we're going to need? And that's where we need to have the conversation.
What should schools do, in other words? And I get asked that every so often. And I think it's actually not very hard. You could try doing it from the bottom upwards, which is, I think, not such a good idea in this case, by saying, what should the classroom of the future look like? What should the teacher of the future be like? What should the curriculum be? That's going to be really hard if we do that. And we are in we tend to do that. But I think we can do it top downwards. We should look first at what should the examination be like. Because all these empire-based systems are driven by a single exam most of the time. A single examination where the learner is expected to perform with only paper and pencil, with no other assistive technology, in a world where, in a real world, where all problems are solved with assistive technology. So we've got the wrong end of the stick there. So if we were to allow the internet to come into the examination hall and design or redesign examinations such that you can tell the learner, here is the question, use every assistive technology that you have and solve it. Then we are preparing them for the world that we are going to release them into. Just as the Victorians did when they said, use the protractor, use the compass to solve your problems. These are our tools.
So think about how teaching would change, how schools would change if we followed Sugata Mishra's advice to take the technology of the day into an examination space and to be able to share and collaborate on our answers. How would that change? It would change things, wouldn't it? It's about purpose. And this, banning mobile phones from examination rooms. And now we're talking about banning them in schools. And I notice every time one said ban the mobile phone, everyone goes, oh, yes, yeah, we should definitely ban mobile phones. I mean, these are mobile computers, powerful devices for independent inquiry and learning. It's amazing, isn't it, how governments and institutions and business collude around not banning the apps and the technology that are the problem, not the device. Think about that, isn't it? I mean, it's the number of neuroscientists working for social media companies. There's more of them than are working in mental health. To addict us to these things, the algorithm is designed to capture your attention, keep your attention, and monetize your attention. There's nothing in there about your well-being. Of course, our kids are getting stuck on these, but banning the mobile computer is insane. Regulating some of these apps, I mean, they need a health warning on them. I mean, this device is way more powerful than a laptop computer. Look at the sensors it has in it, cameras, recording. It knows which direction I am, knows where I am in space. It's just amazing. And we want to ban it. Oh, let's ban pencils then. So I have a bit of a model that I was playing with about, I call it the FPSI pyramid. It's based on the DKI something pyramid. And it's this idea of pyramid of sort of learnings and things, you know. And so at the bottom you've got this foundational stuff, facts and procedures. I mean, they are necessary. I'm not anti-knowledge, you know what I mean, anti-subject matter. And that's what we've been doing, I think, for the last 100 or so years, is having an education system based around procedures and facts. You know, it's education for the 20th century, if you like, you know. And what we valued out of that system was consistency and efficiency. You know, and some of this is preparing young people to work in, you know, an office or a factory, which are essentially the same sort of things, really. It's like repeating repetitive tasks, 9 to 5, not asking too many questions, and that kind of thing, you know. And so we have these buildings for that process, that inculcation process, and the output are these sort of human robots. But the great thing, the wonderful thing, is that as a result of all the research of people like Frederick Taylor, Quetelet, and everyone that came after them, is that we're now actually replacing those cogs in the machine with actual cogs, which means we, as I was saying earlier, we can free ourselves and liberate ourselves to be human. So if we look ahead, skills and innovations, we've got all these challenges. At the beginning, I was talking about the existential threats, but also the opportunities through technological progress and the stuff that we have to do to make sure we thrive into the 22nd century. Skills and innovation are what we're interested in. Imagination, creativity. Remember the human things that we're good at. So this is kind of education for the 22nd century, and I say that because the generations that we have now, Generation Z and Generation Alpha, 67% of the world's population. What they make, what they buy, what they decide, what they create will determine the success of our species and the planet into the 22nd century. This is why this conversation is so urgent and so necessary and so exciting. When we look at the environment, the world is our classroom. Producing autonomous individuals in a collective who are valued for their creativity and their imagination and thinking outside the box and having more than one answer to the difficult questions. And so when we think about purpose and we think about what we're trying to do, we think about how do we design our environments? Are we designing them for purpose? Collaborative spaces. We talk about collaboration and critical thinking and communication and stuff. We shut it all down, don't we? What if we opened it up? What might happen? In the examples we saw earlier from Sugata. Noisy classrooms, kids, excited inquiry, exchanging ideas and collaborating. Think of all the other things that they're learning in that process, not just the subject. Co-teaching and co-learning. Anyone's read Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, talks about teachers as co-learners. Teachers relational, isn't it? That's why you can't replace it with an AI. It's different every time. It doesn't matter if the children know more about a subject than you do. You're a catalyst. Catalyst for conversation, for exploration, sherpering students through this wonderful terrain of their own passions and interests. And de-siloing learning. I mean, it's just like these separate silos. I mean, I get it at the beginning. But the sort of project-based learning, which is what happens in the real world, you're driven to discover things and find things, and you'll learn a lot of the subject content, mathematics or language or art or technique, in the process of following a project that you and your friends are passionate about. And this is an old idea. Friedrich Froebel's gifts, the little building blocks, wooden blocks and things like that. And he was talking about learning through playing and through imagination and creativity that wasn't corralled. So it's all the way back. And little did he know that he was describing, when he invented the kindergarten, a future way of learning. Now, if we think about children playing with blocks, they have the blocks, they have an imagination. Oh, I'm going to build a tower, castle. And they create it, they start building it, and it's fun. They're playing with it, changing things, the imagination in their head, and then they invite a friend to come and play, and they share, building this tower. They build it up, and then, it collapses. They laugh. They reflect on what happened, the strength of the towers and so on. And then they imagine another one, and it goes round and round. It's a creative learning spiral. And this brings us to this idea about instructionism, and I'm not presenting this as we should have one and not the other, but the teaching by instruction, which is very much about imparting facts and procedures. If we start using technology in this area, we get this sort of idea that if education is just instruction, then we'll use computers to just do it better. And it may be that computers are better at inculcating facts and procedures and all that kind of stuff. Transmission of knowledge. Constructionism is this idea of learning by doing, learning by making, giving people good things to do, passion projects and so on, so they can do them much better than they were before. And rather than a transmission of knowledge, this is a reconstruction of knowledge. So on that basis, coming to a conclusion, the role of the teacher in the future. This is Seymour's perspective, and certainly came out in the meetings and conversations we had with people all over the world 10 years ago, is the teacher to create the conditions for invention rather than ready-made knowledge.
I grew up on these streets. And here on these streets, we have dreams and aspirations, making innovations in devil's workshops. Here, hunger is the drive, and we only strive to survive here on the street. Education is key, but what good a key where there are no doors for the poor? We dream dreams because dreams are free, but reality has a fee. You need teachers, you need books, you need to cook ideas that are off the hook. You need an unbreakable mindset that screams, I can. You need a plan and discipline, tough enough to withstand the wind that comes to the desire to win on the streets. You need uniforms, you need to fit in to be seen. You need thick skin, tough enough to block even bullets or the poignant scorn on your neighbor's green each time you dare to try to fly without wings. Again and again till you break down with realization that no amount of motivation can ever equal education. For what good a fertile ground where there are no seeds to sow? And what good a seed if it never grows?
Thank you very much.